Look up a list of the best one-season runs of all time and you'll find the likes of Chernobyl, The Queen's Gambit, Band of Brothers. Add now to that list Auckland FC in the Australia Cup. A semi-final in their first go-around will have to do as the Kiwis sides are kicked out of the 2026 edition. Be warned, Wellington Phoenix, this is what happens when you go to South Melbourne and turn down a souvlaki. We'll run you through all the big changes as the competition kicks off this weekend. New APL CEO Steve Rosich provides an update on the Mariners and other ownership situations in the league. The transfer window continues to trickle over as the conclusion of the Julian Kvaitdal saga leaves us just as confused as when he arrived. We look ahead to another massive week of A-League action headlined by the Sydney Derby on Saturday night and veil Rado Vidisic on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachie Avil and it is a privilege and wonderful to be back in the hot seat of the RBA pod. Poletti, hello to you. Thank you for taking care of the show while I've been gone. A little bit longer than I expected, unfortunately. Was struck down a little bit in bed for a couple of days upon my return to Melbourne, so no good, but I'm feeling up to it. I'm very excited to be back. Plenty of football to talk about. Very exciting times at the moment.
Very exciting times ahead indeed. The Aussie football cycle never slows down, as I think we saw on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning when, news broke of the passing of Rado Vidisic, and by Wednesday morning, like everyone, at least on soccer Twitter, at least it all said their condolences, pieces were being written, and then it was straight back into transfer news, what's going on. Like it never stops, for good and for bad.
Never stops. It feels like there's been a lot of good recently as well, which is a fun place to be. We love talking positively about the league and about Australian football. But the headline today, Poletti, as we said off the top, the Australia Cup, it kicks off as you're listening to this on release today, January 30th, is the Queensland preliminary rounds beginning up north. Everyone else is waiting till at least February, I believe. But the first game of the Australia Cup 2026 will be played. And because obviously the competition is starting, we've seen all the regulations come through, and the big headline is that the Kiwi teams have been kicked out. Now, it's kind of vague in the language, Poletti. There's something in here as well about aligning with AFC competition regulations. Obviously, the fact that these New Zealand teams not only aren't Australian, but aren't in the AFC as well. It's always been tricky. That still is the case with the A-League. But I'm not sure exactly what technical regulations, because whatever you're qualifying for with the Australia Cup, surely it's still representative of the A-League as well. But that was the language that's been given. So no Kiwi teams. Auckland FC just had the one go around. Wellington Phoenix obviously been playing for a little while. It kind of means that just all the Australian teams now get a straight run into the round of 32 with the addition of South Melbourne as well as the champions of the Australian Championship. Simplifies things just a little bit for us, which I think is nice as well.
Well, on one hand, it simplifies things. On the other hand, I think it creates slightly more confusion because, and I'm going to go into NPL land for a minute. Season doesn't kick off for a few weeks, but I'm going to go into NPL land for a minute. What happens with the Doherty Cup? Because South Melbourne, like the Doherty Cup, doubles as the pathway qualifications, like all the state league competitions do, whether it's the Waratah Cup, the Lachie Cup in Tasmania. You'll forgive me for not knowing the names of all the state competitions, or cup competitions, I should say. But, with the Doherty Cup doubling as Australia Cup qualifiers, does that mean South Melbourne are participating in the Doherty Cup? Does that mean if they're
participating? You wouldn't think so, would you?
No. Well, I mean, that because they've got obviously Pro League, they've got, everything else that they're doing. They want to be in every competition possible. But the Doherty Cup is a key part of Victorian football. Admittedly, granted, South Melbourne have been trying to escape Victorian football for the last 25 years, but, I digress. The point is, is only one side, being punished here? I was speaking on radio earlier today, and, I made a comparison to, I want to say off the top of my head, it was the Melbourne Storm when they got done for the salary cap breaches, right? I tried to remember the year, couldn't, but it was Melbourne Storm when they got done for the salary cap breaches, where they still had to play the rest of the NRL season. They weren't eligible to receive points, but they could stop other teams from getting 2 points. So does South Melbourne, say, for example, play Melbourne Knights, right? And South Melbourne win, they knock Melbourne Knights out of the Doherty Cup and they're running for the Australia Cup. But what happens then? Because South Melbourne can't go anywhere. They're already qualified for the Australia Cup. So how does that work with the with the member federation spots and everything like that? Like it creates a genuine issue, and maybe this has already been solved in Football Victoria regulations that I just haven't had time to dive into. But yeah, it's like I think it's a genuine question that needs to be asked.
For sure. There's uncertainty around it. I think there are a number of solutions. Like you could just say, Victoria have 4 places for the Australia Cup national round. So that would be qualifying for the semi-finals of the Doherty Cup, gets you obviously into the round of 32 as well as the semi-finals of the competition. I imagine it would be if South Melbourne get there, then maybe it's the loser of their quarterfinal. Maybe they go through automatically.
But then if you draw South, you're hoping, at that round, at that quarterfinal stage, you win your round of 16 match. You're begging for South Melbourne. You want South Melbourne because that's an auto path through without having to play 90 minutes, which seems unfair for the other 7 teams.
Yeah, well, I mean, luck of the draw, it's a home field advantage if you get drawn as the home team. Sometimes you'll get drawn against a VPL2 team. It's just part of the draw. Look, there's
and
different
sometimes
options.
You'll get drawn against Melbourne Knights every single year.
Yeah, and don't forget as well, Victoria, the Doherty Cup at one stage, because of the Australia Cup, was a very convoluted competition because instead of playing the traditional kind of bracket format in what you'd say like the power of 2, so you have 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and etc., Victoria would play down to 40 and 20 and 10 and 5 because they had 5 entries into the round of 32 in the Australia Cup. And then they'd have an extra weird playoff to make the semi-finals of the Doherty Cup as well. So it's never been a kind of perfect tournament as well when you look at it that perspective. So I'm sure they'll figure something out.
Look, I'm sure they will. I just think it creates a potentially interesting conundrum that has to be something of my words, that has to be solved. And I'm sure whoever's responsibility it is will do their best to do it. I hope that all of that has been thought of before these competition regulations have been handed out by Football Australia.
For sure. What do you make of the Kiwi teams as well being kicked out? I think especially when Phoenix were just by themselves, there was a sense of, okay, they get to play some games in preseason. They're never allowed to play at home as well. That only possibility snuck in for one little season here when Auckland FC joined as well. But that kind of felt a bit more like a handout. But when you have Auckland as well and there's 2 teams involved, all of a sudden you really are stretching the definition of the Australia Cup. And again, I know all these comparisons can be made to the A-League as well, but especially the Cup. We've seen some of the comments of the higher-ups of the 2 clubs in the last week or so come out, probably a little bit snappy as well, and talking about how it costs them money to play. Really, it can upset their preseason sometimes if you're not sure where you're playing, how much money you have to spend to go to the different corners of Australia. Then how do you organise preseason friendlies back in New Zealand as well? So it has been difficult for them. I think, I don't want to say ethically or morally it feels too harsh, but the spirit of the competition feels like it is the Australia Cup and therefore should be solely Australian. And then we have those kind of other judgment factors when we're talking about the A-League.
I don't disagree. That being said, I'm actually somewhat disappointed by this. I liked the idea of having the 2 A-League teams in. I liked the idea of having the Australia Cup playoffs because, there were
the playoffs.
I like the playoffs. I think it's more football, right? And I think ultimately that's all it is. It's more football. I like more football. Yes, it can be a slog sometimes, but I like more football. Especially, given that you look at the state of our competitions, we just don't have enough of it, right? Like, there's not enough games in the A-League. Obviously, you did an interview with Vince Rigari a couple of months ago, and, you looked at that and, in the interview and everything like that. Yeah, I think our preseason is so long already, and this essentially guarantees all the Australian teams at least one competitive fixture in preseason. What do Auckland and Wellington do? Like, okay, Auckland, every 4 years will have the Club World Cup, conceivably, pending how they go in the OFC Pro League, but I'm not going to say anything that's going to get me in trouble. Let's move on. But, they've got the OFC Pro League, right? What do Wellington have? make A-League finals, win a trophy. That's all they've got. They don't have any Australia Cup. They don't have any path to
One competitive game isn't going to move the needle too much, though.
No, but if you win that competitive game, you get a second competitive game and a third one, and so on and so forth. Like Auckland did last year. They made it all the way to the semi-finals and lost to eventual runners-up Heidelberg. Wellington made it to the quarterfinals, where they lost to eventual runners-up Heidelberg. Heidelberg just taken out the Kiwi teams last year and apparently taking them out of the competition proper. But, they don't, as far as I'm aware, and I could be wrong, Auckland, there's no direct equivalent cup competition in New Zealand for Auckland and Wellington to jump into. Like, if we take MLS, for example, right? The Canadian teams don't compete in the US Open Cup, but they have their own cup competition in Canada that they're allowed to compete in. So, I mean, maybe there is a cup competition that, they can now talk with New Zealand football about competing in, but they'd be playing against semi-professional sides and without trying to crap all over our neighbours across the Dutch. It's not exactly the same competition as coming up against an NPL New South Wales or an NPL Victoria powerhouse.
No, it is different. A quick Google has told me that the Chatham Cup is probably the closest comparison, runs regional rounds from April and then concludes in September. So maybe that's something. I mean, the long-term application of what these teams are is always a fascinating conversation. But I think, especially with the Pro League and Wellington not being allowed into that competition, I think as much as you can see the reasons for it, feels harsh, like one way or the other, right? I think them being more involved in New Zealand football is not a bad thing. I think it simplifies things for Australian. My position on the Darwin playoffs has always kind of been that it's a little superfluous.
Okay,
does it really need to be there?
Okay, I didn't necessarily like the Darwin aspect of it. I remember I'm pretty sure it was the first year the playoffs were brought in. It was at the team's home grounds that finished higher, so it was at 9th and 10th place teams. I don't necessarily dislike doing it like that. We got Wanderers versus Brisbane at Wanderers Football Park. That was a good night. I was there. It was, it was a good watch. They were in Newcastle the night before, right? The Darwin aspect felt very, very, it just felt far away. And it was also very, very prohibitive to try and travel there. I know because I looked at doing it last year. The costs of doing so for the 2 nights were just absolutely insane. I could have gone to New Zealand for a week for the prices that it costs to, get to Darwin and then accommodation and everything like that because of the time of year it was, because of how short notice it was. I think it was a month before the games were played that it was announced. So you're trying to put all that together in a short, space of time. And it was very much if you're a fan of these clubs, right, you're going to have to spend an insane amount of money to travel for,
and you're not getting a lot, right? It was either really, really early in preseason where no one had full fitness, you were playing a lot of the kids, or it was right at the end of the season where 4 clubs have just come off a really bad season and all of a sudden they're asked to travel to Darwin and play this extra game and they just want to go on their holidays. So can we at least agree that it did not provide any disincentive in the A-League itself at all? Bottom 4, we got to go to Darwin. No one was thinking about that during the A-League season.
Chiefy was. Chiefy was like, I don't want to go to Darwin, and then he ended up in Darwin. But no, I get your point. No one's like, it's, I mean, and I understand why it was brought in as well. It was sort of you had all these extra teams, but it was also punishment for finished bottom. We don't have relegation, but, we're going to punish you by taking away your Australia Cup squad to try to motivate you to finish higher or do better. It didn't work like that. And we know it didn't work like that. Particularly, even last year, it didn't work like that because Brisbane Roar were down 1-0 to Wellington Phoenix in the 5th minute of stoppage time of 5 minutes. They have a corner, and Michael Valkanis chose not to send the keeper up. You had the chance to force extra time, get that extra body in the box. We saw Was
You
it
picked an interesting
Benfica?
day to talk about potential goalkeeper goals. Yeah,
You
exactly.
saw
Read my
Benfica do it
mind.
this morning, right? But it was that situation where it's like, okay, like if this actually genuinely meant something to Brisbane Roar, like there's no way you leave the keeper back. Like, and so, like it definitely didn't work as a disincentive, as you said.
Yeah. A quick little tangent, just a little aside here. I know you don't watch a whole lot of European football, Poletti, but for those at home that do, will be familiar with the feeling of, looking at the fixture lists potentially overnight and saying, oh, that might be a good game to watch, but maybe you've got an early meeting at work or you got something on in the morning and maybe you just make the decision just that day to sleep in. And the regret when you see that, the social media clip the next morning that something really awesome has happened and you weren't there to see it live. I was so thankful. I was up anyway because I was watching the Arsenal game. Perfect record in the Champions League. Let's go. But just I was about to go, have a shower and get ready and start my day. But just by chance, I stumbled upon the Benfica Real Madrid game and clicked on it and saw the score. And then I looked it up on Flash Score and suddenly saw the consequences of what was happening. And I'm so happy I did because I got to see that moment live of the keeper going up. Benfica needed a goal to qualify for the next round. Real Madrid needed a goal to get in the top 8. And I saw the goal. I saw it, Poletti. I was there. I witnessed it live. I was very, very happy. Anyway, that's my little football story for the morning.
Yeah. Just for clarification, I should say, for those of you who are watching the video version of this podcast, you would have seen me just hold up like a little 0. As I said, I watch a little bit more than 0. I do watch women's, European football from time to time. So I don't watch men's football, men's European football. I'll put the clarification there.
Fair enough. The final angle of this Australia Cup news as well, that has been pointed out plenty of times, but Western United technically still can participate in the Australia Cup. I believe, I don't think there's been any other loopholes like this. They will be, again, theoretically, technically, whatever asterisks you want, the first A-League team to play in the preliminary rounds of the competition because they will play in the Doherty Cup in Victoria through their VPL 1 team. We talked about, well, we will talk about later in the podcast, but you've probably seen that Western United's registration ban from FIFA has gone away. They have paid what is reporting to be almost $1 million to Alexander Prijovic, which was the lawsuit that was the trigger for that ban. That debt has been paid. That ban has gone away. So there were doubts as well of what players have actually been registered for a longer amount of time to actually play in their VPL 1 team as well. But that's been put to bed, thankfully, as well. So, yes, Western United will play in the Doherty Cup. Wouldn't it be hilarious if they made it all the way through the national stages as well? All of a sudden, Western United pops straight back up.
I mean, it was ESPN that reported that, and when I read that article, I'm just like, $1 million? Really? Like that's how much it was? No wonder Prijovic didn't let this go. I thought it was only like, maybe 150, maybe 200, where it's like, okay, I'm not discrediting the idea of, $200,000 not being a lot of money. That would pay off my mortgage. I totally understand the realities of it, but I'm just like, oh, it was that much. Yeah, no wonder he wasn't letting this go. I'd do the same thing. On the VPL side of it, just look, I as an NPL sicko, like, hook this to my veins. Like, yes, please, I want this so badly. But I can honestly see it now, where for a show called Round Ball Australia, we're mentioning a lot of European football today. It's giving like Carabao Cup, FA Cup early round vibes, where it's like, okay, your Manchester United, it's probably a bad example. Your Manchester Cities are letting the kids run through the early rounds, the academy kids, the under 23s run through the early rounds, and then it's like, oh, okay, we're at the quarterfinal stage, got a trophy. Some of you come back, we're gonna put out a couple of starters, and then you get to the semifinals, and it's like, okay, first team from here on out, let's go. We can win a trophy. Like, it's giving, yep, okay, kids, you're all we've got because we've got no one at this club. You've made the national stages around the 32. Congratulations. Well done. A-League boys, come on down. Let's go. Like, we're winning the trophy in our first season back. Like, kids, sorry, some of you are going to be on the bench, but no, you ain't coming anywhere near this.
It's like the thing that's done theoretically for fixture congestion overseas, but Western United haven't played a game in like a year at that point, and they're still running out the kids. It'd be fascinating to see what the rules are actually. Like you imagine halfway through the Doherty Cup run, and all of a sudden they've got their license ticked off for the A-League, and they get the senior players coming back in. Are they allowed to play some of them? I'd wonder. I'm sure there's Victorian registration rules they have to worry about, but yeah, it would be a fascinating scenario. Now, that ESPN piece that we referenced earlier, talking about the Prijovic a debt settled, that was courtesy of Joey Lynch speaking to Steve Rosich, the APL's new CEO. He's given us some other updates on the Mariners and also Canberra United as well. He's confirmed that more than a dozen parties have formally registered interest in the Central Coast Mariners. So this is obviously the sale process that the APL have taken over with operation of the club as well. And they have, quote, no doubt that they will have multiple bidders. So about a dozen registered interests parties. Hopefully that flows down into some proper bidders, and apparently they've all been very engaged with the process as well. The APL will engage in their preferred bidders within the next week or so. So things look like they are moving relatively quickly here. And Rosich would also not rule out that both Western United and Canberra United could join the A-League men's season in 26-27. Now, that's a lot of not ruling out the worst case scenario, Poletti, which we understand. We want to leave that open. Maybe there's some kind of follow on in terms of all these registered parties for the Mariners. Maybe there's actually a club a little bit further south that you might be interested in as well. But we know that the link to the women's team as well, and the necessity to secure investors to hold the future of that club as well in the women's competition, as well as the men's expansion as well. I just hope we get them at the same time with Western United coming back, so we don't have this awkward buy set up. It's really, really annoying, but there is a lot of positive news in here.
There is. But before we get into that, yeah, it's really annoying having a buy, isn't it? All these men's fans going, "Oh, it's great, we don't have the buy this year." Try watching the dub for 2 minutes. Like that's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. Look, a lot of positive news. You know, how much of this is okay? We genuinely have all these buyers willing, ready to go, and how much of that is, well, okay, we've got 6. Maybe let's just fluff the number up a little bit to maybe drive some extra competition. You know, in terms of drive some extra interest, that sort of stuff. But I genuinely hope that all these parties that have been mentioned are, genuinely proper interested. And, the article seems to suggest as much from Steve Rosich. Surely that this gets solved quickly in terms of the Mariners. And that seems to be the indication, is that it'll be done before the end of the season. Everything's going to be good to go for next year. I mean, whether Western United gets done or not is... To be honest,
I still think it's unlikely.
Yeah, I without wanting to sound too harsh to Western United, I'll believe it's happening when I see it. Right? I don't want to buy into this false hope that things are chugging in the right direction. Which, I mean, I've been dealing with this for Canberra for years. Right? This whole idea of Canberra's not going to be run by the Federation anymore. We've got buyers. Canberra's going to be saved. You can have a men's team. Everything's going to be hunky-dory, and you just keep getting that taken away year after year after year. And the survival of the women's team has always been, by tenterhooks for the last few years. And we're literally at crunch time now. The Capital Football have said they're not going to run it anymore. The APL have said they're not going to run it. So we're literally down to the final, potentially 11 weeks plus finals, if that, of Canberra's existence. Like, I'll believe Western United when I say it. My priorities so much more with Canberra United, and not like I've been very critical about the idea of more expansion sides folding. Like, we've had the New Zealand Knights, we've had Gold Coast United, we've had the Fury, but to lose a foundation side of the women's competition in this country would be an absolute travesty. And so, as far as I'm concerned, that should be priority number one. I can understand, because the APL have agreed to run the Mariners, that's going to be priority number one. But I still think Canberra should be priority number one.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation. And I think one of the interesting parts of the comments around Mariners, and even just the APL taking them over as well, and we did highlight this back when I was last on a couple of weeks ago, is that the APL have said in the past, and I understand different leadership, but the APL have said in the past that they're not going to prop these clubs up anymore. But an exception has clearly been made for the Central Coast. The reasoning for that decision would be fascinating to hear, whether it's they are so confident in such a short time frame. I agree with your assessment, Poletti. End of the season sounds about right as that kind of worst case scenario. Would it take this long? They shouldn't be doing it at all, in my opinion. Like it sets a dangerous precedent. We've been down this road before. If it gets away from us,
it has. That being said, can you really let a team die in the middle of the season? Can you they had two sets of fixtures ready for whatever was going on with Western United. Can you imagine going through all of that, finally getting it sorted, to then come, January 1 and be like, hey, Happy New Year, everyone. By the way, we're throwing the draw into complete chaos because we've lost two teams, one in each competition, because Charlesworth has handed back the license. The absolute optics of that are worse than the APL going back on a promise, or not necessarily a promise, but going back on what it said for what is hopefully only a 6-month period. I'd imagine if we get to the end of the season and there's still no buyer, the APL will stick true to their word and go, well, we tried, we just don't have the money. We can't do it.
Yep.
Sorry, Mariners, your license is sitting there in perpetuity until we can find a buyer for it. Which maybe never. And, as much as I just said, it'd suck to lose a foundation side from the A-League women, and it absolutely would. Like, this is a foundation A-League men club. It'd suck just as much to lose them. Like, they already lost the Mariners women's team once. It'd suck to lose them again as well for the second time. Like ultimately, the worst case scenarios are that this sucks.
Yeah. And the issue with this train of thought is, in isolation, you can absolutely make the case for every individual club, as we did for the Newcastle Jets, for the Wellington Phoenix, for Perth Glory. But longer term, the implications are very, very serious. And the clear difference is that right now, compared to maybe 2 years ago when the Jets and Glory stuff was happening, is that the APL actually now do have money to do so. We've known they've drawn back the contributions to clubs, high of, almost 3 million a year down to 500K. They made an operational profit in the last financial year. There is a little bit more money there now, so maybe they can do this. But I think when we all hope in the next kind of 12 to 24 months, maybe a new broadcast deal helps the league out a little bit, and we kind of get above that really just burning on fumes point, then, the league's got to say enough is enough, and you got to survive on your own. But it doesn't feel like we're getting to that point. The language around the Mariners is strong, maybe potentially just a little bit less so with Canberra United, but there is positivity there. One other angle to this conversation as well, Poletti, that I wanted to bring up. I saw an interview this week with Tony Pignata, who is the Football Tasmania CEO, on Win News, and he was talking and reiterating publicly again his desire for an A-Leagues team in Tasmania. And I always find this conversation, when we have external people so interested in the A-League, there is such a dichotomy between the internal perception of a lot of football fans and the people in Australian football towards the financial state of the game. Yet there seems to be a reasonable amount of people seeking to invest money in the game and seeing the potential of the competition. And it's just such a clash of perspectives that I think is fascinating.
I think ultimately it's because, like Pinata, for example, he's been involved, in the A-Leagues previously. He knows, I guess, the potential of the competition is probably the right word to use. I mean, you see football all over the world. It's, growing. Now, how much of that is Ponzi scheme growing, where, the entire thing's going to collapse in on itself eventually, is, some of these massive European clubs just keep on spending and spending and spending to try and keep up. And, you use Barcelona there as a perfect example. That, they had to sell the naming rights to the Camp Nou because, something that you thought would never happen because of how much debt they were in. So you've got that aspect of it. But On the other hand, like looking specifically at the case for Tasmania, I'm going to tell a story. And this comes from my time living in Tasmania, my little 3-month sabbatical down to Tasmania, where I was working as a journalist for the Advocate. And I woke up, actually it started I'll say it started the day before, right? Where, kind of, the newsroom was kind of starting to get the inkling. People were talking, stuff was coming through anonymously, messages, all that sort of stuff, sources, everything that normally goes on in the newsroom, that the AFL was getting ready to announce the Tasmanian team. And then fast forward 12, 24-ish hours, wake up the next day, it's everywhere. Tasmania's getting an AFL team. And I got into the newsroom, and the first thing I did was go to the sports editor, and I go, do you think there's any scope here, not necessarily to take away from the AFL, well, side note, the AFL seems to want to take away from every other sport at every opportunity it gets, but I digress. Not to take away from the AFL as such, but do you think there's any scope for a piece around the A-League just lost its opportunity to get into Tasmania? Because if they needed to do it, it needed to be before the AFL got in there. Once the AFL gets in, you're gone. You already have the Jack Jumpers. To a lesser extent, you had the Hobart Hurricanes already in summer. Any clear sort of air or space you had to try to convince Tasmania as a whole that there was a third team in the state being interested in was gone the second the AFL announced their intention to come to Tasmania. That being said, if anyone wants to invest money, I don't think the APL is in a position to necessarily turn down some of that sort of money, particularly if it comes with solid, sound investment plans. I just think the opportunity is gone.
I think the ceiling of the opportunity is 100% diminished by the existence of the Tassie Devils. But football, we wouldn't be here if we didn't believe in the power of football and what it can do, right? So I think A-League franchises all over the country have opportunity. It's just the level of that opportunity. And I think you're right. It does decrease with the footy team coming in a couple of years' time. I'm already seeing stories about potential 5 figures turning up to their first VFL game when it comes around in a couple of weeks' time. So there's a lot of buzz around there. This is a very long-term thing, I think, for Football Tasmania in terms of getting into the A-League. They're still working on, I think, securing funding for a home of football is their big priority at the moment. They're looking for $80 million for that whole project to maybe do it in stages. But look, we all want growth in the A-League. We want a sustainable A-League. We want a prosperous A-League. And hopefully that comes in the not too distant future. Let's get into some transfer window activity. What have we got? About 2 weeks left until the window is shut. I feel like a lot of the deals have been done already, but the latest is that Jesse Randall won't be leaving immediately, but has signed a pre-contract with Dundee United, so he'll complete his season. He's at a pretty good one at that as well at Auckland FC. He'll move over to Scotland, and he'll join not only Ryan Strain and Zach Sapsford, who are having a good time over there at the moment, but Ashley Maynard Brewer as well, a young goalkeeper, I think 23 years old, has also moved there from the lower leagues of England as well on a 6-month deal. So potentially 4 Australians at that club. We know there are just all these hot spots just popping up, different clubs loving the Aussies at the moment. And another one potentially, which I said in the group chat before, I was a little disappointed that Jacob couldn't make the recording today because I wanted his reaction to a couple of Adelaide specific things. But Panayotis Kikianis has been linked to Heracles in the Eredivisie. This is the club that Ernest Faber has this very unique contract where he's the head coach and then will transition into a technical role. And potentially this is another place where obviously Aiden Hrustic is playing there as well, where maybe some Aussies could come through. But thankfully for Adelaide, as Jacob put it, their season is not over because they do still have a defender on their books. In addition to Bart Vreens, Ayrton Andrioli has confirmed through Lucas Ronaldo is where I saw it, that he will definitely be staying at least until the end of the season, which is a big win for Adelaide.
It absolutely is. They have one fit defender. Congratulations, Adelaide. Like, I mean, look, it's a good thing for Kikianis, I think. To stay in Australia for another 6 months, continue your development in a place where you're guaranteed first team minutes. Right? There's no way that Kikianis is getting left out of Adelaide United squad every week. Like beyond putting you're putting Smits on the team sheet first, and then it's Kikianis, right? Like that. That's exactly what it is, because you know exactly where those two are playing good when you can move around a little bit. So he's probably your third piece, and then you try to work everything around that. But so, good for Kikianis. I think that's absolutely good. And then just on Jesse Randall as well, absolutely love that for Auckland. We've seen seasons get derailed when strikers leave before, so it's definitely a good thing for Auckland and their title hopes that Randall's staying.
Yeah, I like when these players stay for the end of the season as well, especially in this era of the A-League where we know we're getting a lot of outbound transfers. For what it's worth, I think Kikianis is ready as well. I think he's definitely one of those guys who's ready to make that next step. But I'm glad that he gets to see out the season with Adelaide, and then we can wave him goodbye as well as he moves on to bigger things in Europe. The other Adelaide transfer, though, or not even transfer, technically mutual termination. The season is open again. Julian Kavaital, Poletti. This has been a fascinating transfer ever since it first landed on the wire. This deal was done with PSV. Adelaide signed this young talent. He was going to be loaned in the Eredivisie, so the second tier of Dutch football. Barely played in that competition. Has come back to Adelaide. Sorry, not even come back. That's the weird thing about it, right? He was loaned out without even seeing him. He came and played like 25 minutes off the bench in one cup game for Adelaide. Hasn't made a single minute in the A-League. Has reportedly, or at least it's a rumor, that, being an international player blocked the opportunity for Zach Clough to return to the club. Instead, he's off to the Newcastle Jets. And now, just weeks later from that, they've agreed to mutually terminate their deal. This is potentially not even one of the most useless transfers, but one of the most destructive transfers of A-League all time as well.
I think destructive there is the key word, right? Like, I think I said in the group chat, want to be Yongbin Chen, right? Like,
yeah.
But that's definitely nowhere near as destructive as this was. I mean, you even think back to, to Super Mario at the Newcastle Jets, right? Like on field, sure, that was destructive, but off field, definitely not anywhere near the level of what this has been for Julian Quaital. It's an interesting one. I'm just glad it's over, to be honest.
Yeah.
There's still a couple of weeks of the transfer window left. Adelaide. No, I mean, I know Ayrton sort of flagged that Ajax React was the only business they intended to do, but, depending on the terms of the release, don't have to pay Quaital anymore. Potentially, with that opening up a visa spot, maybe there's something there that can help Adelaide, because they're one of these many teams stuck in the middle of the table. If they can just get the right January transfer signing, instead of competing for a spot at the bottom of the six, they can be potentially competing for second spot. I don't know if there's enough. Like, I know they've got the potential to go top of the table, by the end of the weekend, depending on how the goal difference and results play out.
Feels like everyone could go top of the table this weekend.
we discussed that in the predictions game, myself and Jacob. But instead of competing for that bottom of the sixth spot, you can go, well, we can guarantee, we might be able to get ourselves a week off, or we just get one more signing right. So, potentially a couple of busy weeks in Adelaide United, assuming that the checkbook is open, of course.
For sure. A couple other loose ends. Christian Palella, who's an academy left back at Perth Glory. He's going to another, not even Australian hotspot really, but a Perth Glory hotspot, QPR. Over in the English pyramid, they've loved Daniel Benny, and they're clearly on the lookout for more players there as well. Ryan Edmondson has departed the Central Coast Mariners. Will be well remembered as a crucial cog in that Mariners machine during the historic Continental Treble. Scored the sealer against Melbourne Victory in the grand final for the A-League as well. He departs the Mariners. And Amir Abdullah as well, of course, of NPL Victoria fame, scored his goal at AFCON, was rumoured to so many different places all around the world. He's off to Algeria as well, which was an interesting selection. But that is You're raising your eyebrows at me. I'm pretty sure I have that right.
I hadn't heard that. So, I mean, clearly I haven't been paying attention to Mark Ivkovic, because I'd imagine that was an Ivka bomb. He's come out with potentially given his propensity for NPL Victoria. But yeah, I hadn't heard that one. I thought you were going somewhere else, to be honest. I thought you were going.
Right.
I thought you were going back. I thought you were going back to the glory with Adam Bagaria being loaned out for the remainder, or not even for the remainder of this season, for the NPL season to Marconi in the NPL New South Wales. It was flagged last month by Perth Glory that we've got 30 players on the books. We need to get rid of some of them. We've already seen a few players head out on loan, and Adam Bagaria, the latest on that list. He'll be heading to the NPL New South Wales and Marconi.
Very good. Well, I'll do a quick little search after we're done. I'm pretty sure the Abdallah news is correct. If you're hearing this in the podcast, it is correct. Otherwise, I'll cut it out. You don't need to worry about it. Poletti, let's get stuck into our weekend look for the upcoming A-League action. And for me, for as long as this man plays in the Sydney Derby, my pledge to him is that he will always be my answer to who's at a big weekend for Anthony Pantazopoulos. Anthony, Panta, I see you. I love what you're doing. I think you were telling me earlier in the week, Polly, they're tracking towards a potential sellout at Sydney Football Stadium as well for this derby.
I think that's where they're heading, based on certainly the numbers that Sydney FC have put out. I've since been given the indication that maybe it's going to be closer to 30K rather than a complete sellout of 45K. So maybe they haven't opened up the entire stadium. So depending on what it is, but regardless, it's still going to be an absolutely bumper crowd. Pantazopoulos did it at Parramatta. He's got a chance to do it in East Sydney now, and can you just imagine if he's the one doing it again? Like,
absolutely.
He's come out this week, and there was a piece that George Clark wrote for AAP where Panther talked about it, and 50 to 100 death threats. He's happy for the good fun and banter, but it was really starting to get over the line because Sydney fans genuinely hated him. So sometimes the pantomime villain becomes the actual villain. But he's gonna do something. In fact, I'll give everyone a little bit of teaser for our predictions game, which is for members only. We go through game by game preview. And we make predictions. And my prediction this week was around Anthony Pantazopoulos, and it was Anthony Pantazopoulos is going to have a major impact in the Sydney Derby. Yeah. I deliberately left it open to interpretation, but yes, that was my prediction. So
100%. Yeah. I love the way he goes about it. He talked the talk before the first derby of the year, and then he walked the walk as well, and got the reaction. I love the clip of him walking off the field, and the players are giving it to him, the fans are giving it to him, and he's just kind of doing the show me the ears and shush, whatever. Look, if anyone's sending death threats to players, you got to take a hard look at yourself. But he's playing the role of the villain, and he's doing it perfectly. I love the atmosphere he's creating. I love that he's become that symbol of that Western, kind of culture, the shirt tucked in, the slick back hair, get stuck in your challenges. He's the whole ethos of the Wanderers Football Club could be summarised by Anthony Pantazopoulos. I love what you're doing. Keep it up. I'm looking forward to a big derby on Saturday evening. Poletti, for you, who's it a big weekend for?
For me, I think it is a big weekend for the Perth Glory. They've been on a little bit of a slide recently. Adam Griffiths addressed it in his post-game press conference last week. Look, I'm not going to take the Wanderers result. I'm not going to have the Wanderers result go against them. Asking anyone to play football in those conditions is absolutely insane. Dealing with the heat. So you give up a last-minute winner when the players are probably exhausted, and you're dealing with someone who's match fit. In the UK, coming off the bench. 20 minutes, admittedly not used to these sorts of temperatures, but, still match fit and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not necessarily going to take that away from the Glory, but if they go down to Auckland, Well, suddenly, pending other results, they're a lot further away from the six than they are closer to it. And we were talking about earlier this season once uh it's been so long I can't even remember the guy's name. The former
What are we
Glory
talking about here?
coach, the former Glory coach is
Drillich.
David Drillich. That's it. Yes. Adam Griffiths had them winning, 1 in a row, 2 in a row, 3 in a row, 4 in a row. Breaking records for wins away from home that the Glory hasn't had since 1962, and all of this stuff, right? Like everything was coming up Glory, and now it seems like it's just slowly come back down to earth. And I'm sure Adam Griffiths has his eyes on making them a finals contender as opposed to bottom end of middle table team. And a loss here to Auckland would certainly put them in the category of the latter. Obviously, still plenty of time in the season to, change it with how compacted the table is. But yeah, I think it is a big weekend for the Perth Glory.
For sure. Well, talking about breaking records, the Newcastle Jets have never won 5 consecutive A-League men's games in a row. And for me, in a dream world, they get it done. They go 5 in a row. It's hard not to love this team at the moment. The football they're playing, the goals they're scoring, Mark Milligan trusting the kids, trusting the local kids as well. The Jets are on a tear, and I really, really want to see them keep it going, especially in this season that's been so tight. No one's able to string form together. I think there's only, I looked at the table yesterday, there's only like one other team that has won, that has a streak in the league. And that is Adelaide United. They've won their last 2. No one else has won consecutive games in a row at all. And the Jets are at 4 going for 5. So massive weekend for them in a dream world. Would love to see them break that record. And I'm not sure on the timing of the games, but definitely on other results. They could go top of the league as well, which would be astounding.
Yeah, absolutely. Proper fantastic stuff for the Jets. They're flying high, so hopefully they're able to draw a crowd as well, which is where my in a dream world goes. I'm just doing quick maths off the top of my head. So 20. My in a dream world is that the total crowd attendance for the weekend goes over 70,000 people.
You love going crowds, don't you?
Look, we hear constantly that the crowds aren't good enough. They're this, they're that. I think, the way I'm looking at it, right, is like, okay, Wellington haven't been drawing the best of crowds lately. Yes, it's hot in Adelaide, but Adelaide usually draw a crowd of a sizable impact. If the Newcastle Jets were ever going to crack 10,000, it's this weekend. Yeah. The derby, is gonna add a massive bumper to the crowd. Perth Glory, despite everything I said 2 minutes ago, they got, I think it was 12,000 people thereabouts last home game. They've got every reason to come out against Auckland. A fixture they won last year, mind you, handing Auckland one of their rare losses last season. And the Central Coast Mariners, okay, they've had issues, but Victory are flying high. Maybe fans have a little bit of incentive to come out. So I think when you take all those factors into account, in a dream world, 70,000 crowd and everyone's able to go, well, okay, maybe things aren't as dire as we've made it out to be. And, like things are on the up. And I understand, a lot of that's going to be centered around the derby, which will probably be responsible for nearly 50% of that. But I still think there's enough positives to take from it and enough, to what I'm looking for. Like
optimism, yeah.
Yeah, optimism, yeah. Not the exact word I was looking for, but a good one.
Close enough.
Yes.
I can't help myself. For what it's worth, I think they're going to come just short of 70K. I think it'll be 68.
I think that's more likely, to be honest. But that's why I said in a dream world.
In a dream world, right? You are. All right. Finally, worst case scenario for me, it's the Victory. If they lose to the Mariners, they've looked like such a good team. They had such a good run. Then they had the frustrating loss against the Wanderers. Then the even more dramatically frustrating loss against Adelaide United in the original rivalry over at Highmush, and they responded so well in that 4-0 victory in the Big Blue. To then go and turn it around in a loss on the road to the Mariners, that would just kill your hopes for Victory fans. Any kind of semblance of gaining momentum towards the final series, I think with a loss there would just get killed. You wouldn't have any faith that they could do something consistently if they don't win this game, for me.
Yeah, no, I'm in total agreement there. My worst case scenario, again, sort of goes back to the crowds. Wellington have had some abysmal crowds this year. Worst case
You
scenario,
can't go crowds again.
yes, I can. If they get under 3,000 people, which has not happened so far this year, like it is a good slot. It's Friday night, 7 p.m. Perfect slot for football. They couldn't do it, but I mean, they've been playing some good football lately, but they've also been playing some dire football. Oh yeah,
They've been playing some brave football, Poletti. It's brave.
Okay, let's use that. They've been playing some brave football lately. Yeah, look, I think genuinely that's worst case scenario is if they get their lowest crowd of the season on Friday night. Okay, they're coming off the loss of the Jets, but they beat Sydney FC the week before that. Like there's hope there. There's optimism there for the fans to turn up, and if they don't,
yeah. And it's going to be interesting as well, that game, because of Melbourne City and all their transfers. Who's going to get a run in? Is Daniel Arzani going to make an impact? No Kai Truen. What is that going to do to their lineup? Can Ryan Teague just slot straight in? It's a very interesting game to watch for a lot of reasons. Finally, for today, we want to express our sadness at the passing of Rado Vidisic as well. Poletti, it's funny being my age and occasionally you'll get the news of a death of someone in the Australian football community. And to be fair, I don't know, I'm being honest here, I don't know a lot about Rado Vidisic and his impact in the game, but I was really struck this week by just the pure quantity and the people that came out expressing their sadness at what had happened and talking about the effects that he'd had on so many different people was really significant. I know you had a few interactions with him in a press, kind of relationship. But it is just so clear by the outpouring of love that's happened over the past few days, just what a endearing man and a really good football person and a really kind person that he was.
Yeah. When I came across this news on Tuesday night, I was recording the predictions game with Jacob, and I just was completely taken aback by that we actually had to stop recording for a few minutes. So that, you could properly digest it. And look, Rado, for all his achievements and contributions to Australian football, trophies with basically every club he's been at, the father of a soccer room in Rado Vidisic, who he was working with basically up until his death, at Brighton and, over in the UK, was the reason that, a big part of the reason why Dario was able to coach the Melbourne City women's team, because he was working as an assistant under Rado, and, the replacement was there when Rado had to go coach the men's team at City. And, despite all those accomplishments, the players that he's coached, the trophies that he's won, all of his achievements, genuinely, I feel, and others have said similar, that his biggest contribution to football is being one of the genuinely nicest people in football. Like proper, genuine, nice person. Like every press conference, admittedly we're over Zoom, but every press conference you turn up to, was always smiling, happy to have a laugh before, you get the formal proceedings underway. And even during the presses, if there was an opportunity to laugh, he'd laugh. If there was an opportunity to smile, he'd smile. He'd joke with you. He'd do all these things, and and that was after the cameras turned off as well. Like proper, genuine, nice person. I haven't met anyone who's ever had a bad word to say about Rado Vidisic. And when I finally had a chance to meet him in person, it was actually at that aforementioned Australia Cup playoff at Wanderers Football Park that we mentioned earlier. Just complete random chance meeting at halftime, because he was he was at Western Sydney because the Young Matildas were having a camp, and he was part of the coaching staff there with Leah Blaney for a time. And shake the hand, hi, how are you, all of that. Like again, genuine smile on his face, even though he was in a little bit of a rush moving around different places and stuff like that. But still took the time, say hi, have a quick chat. And I left nearly every interaction with Rado feeling better about myself. And that's a very rare thing to happen to anyone. But with Rado, and it was genuine, proper all the way through. And I think that's probably best expressed, in this. And this is in an article that Joey Lynch wrote for ESPN that they actually published by itself because it was part of a broader piece that Joey wrote, and they decided to, run it by itself. And this is from the article. Brilliant article. I'd recommend reading it if you get the chance. And it's the measure of the man that, for all his accolades, Vidisic felt the chance to support Rebecca Stott's return to the field was the highlight of his career. Quote, Rebecca Stott, that is the highlight of my coaching career, Vidisic told me after Stott's return. I've had 36 undefeated games with Brisbane. I've worked with Ange, coached Del Piero. I've won the FFA Cup with victory. And now here with City, I'm a part of a fantastic organisation. But to be part of someone's life journey to defeat the illness that she has had, to come back and to see her, how dedicated she is to the sport, to the women's game, and how much following she has got and how much people adore her, I think for us, that is the winning season. If we don't achieve anything else this year, just by helping her to get back on her feet and to achieve whatever dream she has in front of her, I think that is the winning right here. And I think that speaks perfectly to Rado. It wasn't about the trophies. Like, to help someone back from cancer, this was after she left Brighton. She then went on to, compete in the Home World Cup for New Zealand, right? Maybe that doesn't happen if Vidisic doesn't help her get back into football, just the outpouring of support from everyone in Australian football, speaks volumes about it. And I had the opportunity earlier this week to speak to Nick Stoll for an interview that's coming out next week here on the Round Ball Australia podcast. And when I asked him about Rado, whilst he didn't have a story personally, this is what he had to say. I think it'd be remiss not to mention, unfortunately, the passing of Rado Vidisic. Have you got a Rado story? Do you ever have run-ins with him in a good way? That.
No, I personally don't have a Rado story. What I can tell you is that sort of everyone that I've spoken to was just like, and I mean, people I've spoken to in private, everyone was like, oh, such a nice guy, great guy, yep. Which, isn't always the case, especially sort of in Australian football. But yeah, everyone spoke really well of him. Tommy Orr on the show that we recorded today, he said he was the best assistant coach that he worked under his whole career. He was obviously part of that famous Barcelona team with Ange Postecoglou. And yeah, so he was a legend of the game and by all accounts, sort of a wonderful person. And I think he'll be sadly missed for the game, and hopefully his son, Dario's coaching over Brighton's women's team, can continue on the legacy.
And Lachie, you listen to that, and even though, as Nick said, he didn't have any personal interactions with Rado, everyone he's spoken to said similar things to what I just said, and I think that's genuinely the measure of who Rado was. Rest in peace, Rado. You'll be proper missed.
Well said, mate. All right, that'll do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Thanks, Poletti. Thank you all for listening at home. Tough times when we lose someone so dear to us, especially with what clearly the reputation that Rado had. Enjoy your weekend of football. We'll see you next week for your A-League debrief. Goodbye.